In this video, we're going to talk about classes and objects in Python. So generally, we're going to talk about object-oriented programming. This topic is one of the most interesting and really fundamental aspects of programming that you really need to understand. So we're going to just break it down simply, build something together, and by the end, you'll be writing your first class in Python. So first, what is object oriented programming in general? So, object oriented programming is a way to organize your code by creating objects that have both data and behavior. So, we're going to see what this means. But instead of basically writing a bunch of random functions and variables, you basically group them together, but you group them together logically. That is the sort of premise of object oriented programming. So, think of a car. In a car, data in a car looks like color, the model of the car, the speed of the car. That is the data that you need to understand about the car. But what is the behavior of the car or the functionality of the car? Is that you can drive the car, you can brake, you can honk. There are all these things that you can do with a car in terms of functionality. So object-oriented programming makes your code cleaner, reusable, and easier to manage, especially and most especially when your program grows. So to make a lot of sense about this, we're going to start by understanding first of all what a class is, because these are the two major things we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about classes, and we're also going to talk about objects. So these are very important aspects that we need to understand. So starting with classes, a class, we refer to a class as a blueprint for creating an object. Simple as that. So I'll just write here, this is a blueprint for creating an object. So again, the same way you'd need a blueprint for you to build a house. So in this case, for to create an object in Python in programming, you're going to use a class as that blueprint. So if that is the case, then in turn, that makes the object an instance of a class, right? So, but we're going to just talk about classes first. So classes define what an object should know and what that object should do. That is really important to understand. An example, we're going to talk about what you've just mentioned about cars. We're going to create the way you'd rather create a simple class of a car. You'll use the class keyword, then followed by the name of the name of the class. In this case, car. But it always, when it comes to naming, it always has to start with a capital letter. Then after you've done that, you can basically now give us the blueprint here. So where all the logic goes to, this is the blueprint. For example, what a car is supposed to have, what a car is supposed to do, all that is going to go to that point. But for now, I'm going to just the pass keyword there just to hold this space. So a class is like a blueprint of a house, and you can use the blueprint to build many houses. And in this context, you can use the blueprint to build many projects, because again, the class is a blueprint, or rather is a blueprint for creating an object. When it comes to objects now are actually the actual things that you create based on your blueprint. I hope you're still together up to this point. An object refers to the actual thing that you create based on the blueprint that you have created, that you have from your object. So an example is, in this case, we have created an sort of a class of a car, right? So to use this as a blueprint to create an object, all you need to do is you need to call the car class the same way we would normally call a function. Then what the result that you get from this, that result is the object. So if I create an object, I'll call it, let's say, my car like that. So the result I get out of calling the class, that is my object. And like you've mentioned, you can create multiple of this. So you can create another and call it maybe your car. And this is another blueprint again of the car class that we just created. So in this case, my car and your car are different objects that have been created from the same car class. To build our first class, we're going to just edit on what you've seen up to this point. So we've defined our class, and our class is called car. And I'm going to just get rid of this for now so that you can be able to, just write everything. The first thing that we usually have is we create a constructor function. But this is the one thing that I want you to note here. Normally, when you define functions, we refer to them as functions. But when you define and declare a function inside of a class, you no longer refer to it as a function, or rather, you now refer to it as a method. But still, all the rules that you use or you follow in creating a function still do apply. The only thing that changes is the naming. Now you create a method. So the first method that we start with is what we refer to as a constructor method. So what you do is, again, use the function keyword. Then you're going to have double underscore in it. So double underscore in it, this is the constructor method. And this is the method that runs when you create a new object. Take note of that. It is the method that runs when you create a new object. So when you're creating the constructor, you're going to give it a number of parameters. But one of the parameters that it must have is self. So the self keyword or the self parameter is a reference to the current object. And we're going to see what that means when I say it is a reference to the current object once we start running our code. So you have the self keyword, then you can have now all the other parameters of the car that you want to implement. So in this case, for example, you want to have a brand of the car, you want to have the model of the car, you want to have maybe the year that car was made. Like we mentioned, when you're dealing with, rather when you want to write down uh, this element of a class, it always has the properties. So the properties of that class, in this case, the properties of a car, are the ones that we pass in as parameters to our constructor method. Then the functions of the car, the possibilities or operations of a car and all, that we're going to define them as methods. So now we have our parameters, which are the methods, the parameters of the class. And we still use the self keyword to be able to create this reference to the current object. And how we do that, we just create self dot, in this case, we'll start with brand, and we're going to assign the brand parameter that we just created to this. So this is us now basically creating this reference to the current object. Then we'll just say self dot, the next one is model, and then we're going to assign the model to this, and we're going to also have self dot, the other one was year, and we're going to assign year to this. So with this, we've been able to create the references that we need. Now we define now once we've defined the attributes, we can now define the methods, which we've mentioned as the behaviors of the class. And to do that, there are a number of methods or behaviors of a car that we've mentioned. For example, you can drive a car. So I can create a method and call it drive. But like you mentioned, the self keyword is important for reference to the current object. So I have to pass in the self keyword as a parameter to this. Then you can now proceed. You can also add extra parameters if you want to, but we're going to see this more cases in the next lesson and in the next 2 lessons. So you pass in the self keyword, and you can just print a simple statement probably here that says, I'll just use an F string actually, and says, for example, we want to just a statement that describes the entire car. So you can just say there. Then normally, how we would pass this, you'll pass in a variable name like that. But in this case, if you just pass it like this, it will not give you the result that you want, because the brand object is already is already in the current object. So for us to get it, we have to use the self keyword. So we'll have to say self dot brand. So this is going to create the reference to the brand variable parameter that we have in this object. Then we do the same for the model. So just say self dot model. And finally, we're going to do the same. We can add on for year, but I can just say let's say driving. Uh, Driving. So you can say, for example, the Toyota Corolla is driving, right? So we can actually start with the year. For example, you can start the 1992, then the brand of the car. So you can just say yourself dot year, like that. And you can add many other methods if you want to. For example, I'm just going to add one extra method. So you can add another method for stopping the car. So again, these are functionalities that you have to carry out on the car. Remember, self keyword has to be in there, and you're going to have your print. And here, you're going to print another statement. You can also just print the statement with everything else. But okay, there's no need for me to do that now. I'll just write a plain statement. And I'll say the car has stopped, like that. Now that we've done this, we've been able to create a car class that has a constructor method and extra methods on the functionalities or behaviors of this car. Once we've done this, once we've created the class, this is now the blueprint. One thing you'll notice here is that we have not hard coded anything. And that what that shows you is that we can be able to create multiple of these cars. All you need to do is just change the brand, the model, and the year. And just to do that, we'll do with what we already had here. For example, in my car, we're going to, let's say the car is a Tesla, and the model of the car is a Model S, uh, a Model S. Then it is maybe a 2023 Tesla, like that. Then you can also have a second one here. This second one can be a simple uh, yeah, a Toyota. Then the model here is the Corolla, and the year could be 2022. So in this case, what we have here is two different objects of the car. So we have the first object of this car that has different variables to it, then or other arguments the same way as this. Like I mentioned, the way you call your object or rather your class is the same way you'd normally call a function. You'll call it, then pass in the parameters, but not in this case, not parameters but arguments. But not in this case, the arguments that you pass in are the ones that you defined in your constructor method. You can see brand, model, year, all of them, right? So you don't pass in for self, like you've mentioned, self is a reference. Then note that this has to be in uppercase. These are some of the mistakes that a lot of people make. So make sure that your car, the name of your car, or rather the name of your class starts with a capital letter. Now that we have these objects, we can try to, carry out a number of functions. A number of functions. In this case, let's say we want to drive the Tesla. So I can just say my car, my underscore car. Like you mentioned, we can. This is an object now. So the way you deal with an object is similar to how you deal with a function, not a function, but with a dictionary. So you can just say this dot drive. So we just want to drive the car. So you can call the drive method that we have there. And if we run our code, I'll just call Python 3. I call this intro.py. It says the 2020 Tesla Model S is driving. Again, you can say this. Again, note that I created an OOP Python folder, so you should be able to see it in the repository on GitHub. The link is below on the bio. So now this is what you have. You can do the same for the Toyota Corolla if you wanted to. You can still stop the car. For example, I can just say, for example, my car, my underscore car dot stop. And if I run this again, you see the car is driving, the car has stopped. And that is a daily what a basic introduction into object-oriented programming and what classes and objects are. But almost everything that you use in your applications or in your websites today, almost everything uses object-oriented programming. For example, like for a shopping cart, each item in a shopping cart is an object. If you're on online, you're on maybe on X, or you're on on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. For example, on YouTube, each video that you watch is an object. If you're on Spotify, each song that you listen to is an object. So object-oriented programming is everywhere in every aspect of our lives. That's why it's really, really important to understand and get it right from the go at this point, because most of the things that are going to be doing from now onwards is going to be the assumption that you already understand the basics of this, right? So you can go ahead and try and challenge yourself to create an object for something. For example, look around. Let's say in your house, you can create an object for your house. To create a class for a blueprint for what your house looks like. Then you can create now an objects out of it. In this case, multiple houses out of it. Again, just convert any literal objects or items, anything around you, into object-oriented programming. So far we've been able to see what classes are. We've seen that class is a blueprint for creating an object. we've seen that an object is an instance of a class as a result of that, and that object-oriented programming is a way for us to organize our code by creating objects that have both data and behavior. And what we've mentioned about here is about the aspect of data is that data refers to the attributes or the properties of the specific object that you want to create a blueprint of. In this case, for a car has properties like it has a brand, it has a model, it has a year. The same thing goes for a person. A person has a number of properties. A person has a name, a person has age, they have height, they have occupation, they are all these things. Then when it comes to behavior, now this refers to the methods or the kind of functionalities that these people can carry out or these objects can carry out. For example, for a car, you can drive it, you can stop it, you can do many other things. For a person can eat, a person can sleep, a person can speak. These are a number of things that you start to think of. Then, as you think of them in that perspective, now we're going to just broaden it larger and larger. And even some of the projects that we built before, you can also represent them in this way. You're going to see a number of challenges, a number of projects you're going to build, how this applies. So that is it on object-oriented programming. I'll see you on the next one as we move on part 2 of this object-oriented programming concept.